So, welcome everyone to episode 6 of the TechPulse podcast, TechPulse Healthcare podcast, focus on healthcare as always. With me is my co-presenter Jonathan, and today we're very honoured to have our guest, Professor Sam Vine. Professor Sam is a world-leading expert in psychology, human performance, and immersive technology application. He's a professor of psychology at the University of Exeter, director of research and impact within the Exeter Medical School, and unit of assessment lead for the research excellence framework at Exeter. Oh, let's take a break now.
I think we've run out of time, actually.
Yeah, that's right. We've used our word count. He's also the chief scientific officer and co-founder of Synion, I'm going to say. You can correct me if I'm wrong. A company developing immersive technology and innovation. So, welcome, Professor Sam, to our podcast. Very pleased to have you here and to hear some more about what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and well done for getting Cineon right first time. That's quite rare. So,
All right.
so well
Yeah.
played. Yeah.
I had cinnamon in my mind, you see, and then it worked out. So good on the brain, yeah. So you're just looking at your background. It's kind of like it's where psychology, human performance, and technology seem to come together with yourself. Kind of how did that come about, and what inspired your move into more immersive technology and VR and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good description. That's precisely what I do. I see myself as a cognitive scientist at heart. I am interested in what goes on between the ears and how that influences the way people behave and perform and how they learn, actually. Um, and a lot of my early work and a lot of our early work at the lab group in Exeter was focused on all of the kind of classic performance settings you can think of: aviation, military, sport, um, performance. In terms of interviews and artistic performances, and just any setting in which somebody performs under pressure. Um, and we were using simulation technology in order to research those areas. So in the very early days of our research, we were using surgical simulators and flight simulators. As those simulations have moved towards XR in both research and in training, our research has just naturally gone that way as well. So when we were previously picking up simulators in the lab, we started to use XR technologies. But slowly, actually, the technology itself became the sort of research question itself. So the focus of the work started to be about what these technologies can do and might do, and how we use them appropriately to get the outcomes that we're interested in.
Sounds very good. And then with that, let me say if I can get it right the second time, Synion. How did that come about? Kind of what gap were you filling there, and yeah, how did you end up with that?
Yeah, so Cineon was, I guess, an evolution of some of the really applied and practical work that we were doing at Exeter in the sort of late 2010s. So 2014, 15 particularly, we were quite busy looking at applied practical solutions for training. And I met with my co-founders of the company, Toby and Kate, in about 2016, and we decided that we wanted to try and do simulation training and XR related training much better, essentially. We wanted to make sure that there was a strong evidence base for the decisions being made about when to use this technology. And we wanted to apply artificial intelligence and other scientific insights to make the technologies as smart and as usable as they can be to get best outcomes. So Synion was really an attempt at building products that can go into those industries that we were researching and actually make a difference. The
Would you
research.
say, yeah, sorry, would you say the difference between kind of, so there's quite a few companies out there, VR ones, who are doing various things, but the differentiator for you, what is the research part? Or,
Certainly the products that we build, we think are evidence based, and we spend a lot of time and put a lot of careful attention into ensuring that there is a logic to why the tool's been designed the way it's designed to be, and a logic behind why it should work in practice for given end users. but also using research techniques and research skills that we have to actually test and evaluate the things that we're putting out there, I think is a USP. Our ability to almost sort of self-calibrate the tools by rigorously testing them when they're deployed. I think that's a real unique selling point of the company. I think that's why we are able to build kind of quite meaningful relationships with end users in a range of different industries in health, in aviation, in the military. It's an interesting space to work in when one is essentially evaluating one's own work scientifically. So it does create difficulties and tensions, but it's something I'm really passionate about. I think you can build technology that you think works and you believe in, and then you can set about essentially trying to falsify your own claims, trying to disprove your own original hypothesis. And if you're not able to, then you're really quite confident that what you originally thought is true. And so far from being difficult, it's actually a really kind of stress alleviating way to do work. You build it, you believe in it, and you think that it works, and then you spend a period of time trying to prove it doesn't. And if you're unsuccessful, then you believe in it even more. So yeah, I think that's a USP certainly. And I think, well, I mean, there are companies doing similar things, and I think even in if you go back to the sort of pharmaceutical industry, this is a similar philosophy. You build innovation, you test it and evaluate it, and then you see if it works. But doing it in the context of this kind of complex technology ecosystem, particularly with the inclusion of AI and other kind of machine learning techniques, is it's a difficult space to do that in, but we do a really good job.
Do you think? Sorry, Jonathan, I thought you were going to say something, but do you think it's kind of lacking that sort of thing in the space in this space generally? You know, like the validation, the proving. There are some studies out there that are oft repeated, like more generally done by big consultancies, which you know when you look under the covers, perhaps they're not. There's not much under there as you might have hoped.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's something you'd see more of, and do you provide that service as well?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to articulate in a short period of time, and it's obviously quite politically charged as well. So I will tread carefully here, but no, there's an abundance of validation and empirical evidence out there for extended reality technologies, and a large proportion of that work is really good. And lots of credit needs to be given to the researchers that have taken the time to do those complex bits of work. Really rigorous and reliable science is hard. It takes time, it's expensive, and it's technically difficult. Um, but as you alluded to there, when you dig deep into some of these publications and some of the evidence that's being leaned on, it's lacking quite often. And some of the claims that actually spin out from that research are often unfounded in relation to the quality of the research that was done. Um, but we get that it's hard, and indeed not all of our research is the most groundbreaking or the most rigorous or robust. We do our best, and we respect that others are doing their best as well. But we really think that because of the pedigree we have in doing really core foundational theory-driven, data-driven research, we do have an advantage there in terms of being able to be confident when a product does or doesn't work. And that comes from a range of different methodologies. I mean, we're not necessarily talking here about getting to kind of rigorous randomized control trials just yet. But even our initial conception of an idea is based on lots of observations that we've had from the range of different types of research that we've been able to do over a long period of time. And some of our initial evaluations, even our very early evaluations, are designed with kind of scientific control and experimental control in mind, which is difficult. But what we also do is we try not to do away with too much of the realism that we might have by deploying these tools with real people. So we try and keep those experiments out there in the wild, as we say. So we don't sort of take everything back to the lab and try and do stuff in a controlled way. We do controlled work as much as is possible in the real environment that these people operate in. So you'll often see both at the university research group and at Cineon, we take tools into weird and wonderful places, operating theaters, skills houses in the military, flight decks of planes, and do the work there with the real people. So I think that's that's as much a superpower that we have as our scientific rigor is, our ability to get out there in the wild and do it for real.
That's really interesting. I think, yeah, the question about the research is fascinating. Do you have any examples of when you've gone out there to prove something doesn't work and actually you find that it doesn't?
Hmm. Oh, the list of things that don't work is far longer than the list of things that does, right? And that's a sign, I think, an organization with integrity and rigor. And
Right.
that really is driven by the origins of the group coming from,
Mm.
let's say, a scientific background. Yeah, there are loads. I mean, to give an example, I think it was about 2018, maybe just prior to the pandemic, we were investigating a particular training intervention called feed forward eye movement training. So this is a form of training where you essentially use virtual reality to show people the eye movements of experts as they're performing a skill. And this has been shown in some of our other research to be quite an effective way of learning skills in the early phases of skill acquisition. So if you're an expert at something and I get to see what you did with your eyes using eye tracking technology, that really helps me to quickly understand what you're doing and pick up that skill. And we thought that this would be a really good marriage, this eye movement training intervention with VR. And we published some work that actually shows it doesn't really work quite as well as we first thought, particularly for people who have already got some basic skill in a task. And this particular task was actually room search and clearance. So this was moving into buildings and searching those buildings,
Mm.
uh, declaring the room kind of clear or whatever, and then leaving. So a very visually intensive task, and it didn't work. And this finding essentially then dictated the direction of travel for the next set of research questions, but also the next sort of stages of product development. Um, but conversely, we did similar studies in other industries, in aviation in particular, and we found that a similar intervention with similar technology was actually really effective for that particular user group. And so our research focus has now become on understanding more about why that might be working and what the mechanisms are. But of course, it led the business towards focusing on that industry and those end users and really developing products for that group. So
Mm.
this is why we now have a particular emphasis on products in aviation. Synion's product Tacit, training aircrew competency using eye tracking, is I guess the result of that period of research and development.
Wow. Okay. So on the eye tracking side then, Sam, I remember you talking not that long ago actually, and you gave a presentation at Stoke Mandeville, I think, and you very eloquently talked about the eyes being the window into the soul, and how you showed data and imagery that showed the level of insight that you can get into someone's thinking and feeling and intentions from where they're looking and their eye movements. Bringing it back to healthcare, and you mentioned surgery before. What's the kind of latest work that's going on with that?
Yeah, we've got a lot of work going on in surgery. We've also got some work going on in helping patients with phobia of healthcare and accessing healthcare. And I can speak through both of those. Just to rewind slightly, though, I think you gave me credit a moment ago for a Shakespeare piece of wisdom. So thank you for that. It was indeed William Shakespeare who said the eyes are the window to the soul. I'll claim it from here on. I don't think
It's yours.
I don't
It's
think he'll
yours.
mind anymore. I think he's long gone. So, but no, that's been proposed a lot by a lot of different people that the eyes they're not just a sort of outward in kind of information gathering tool. They're actually very revelatory about what it is that might be going on internally, cognitively, or emotionally. And our research is interested in understanding the boundaries of that. And again, almost taking a very pessimistic view in the research team at the university about what we can and cannot index from the eyes. But where we find something that we can index, we then put that to work in our products, but again, both in the research team and in the company in Cineon, to good use. So in surgery, we've got a great little team who are in collaboration actually with the Royal Cornwall Hospital down in Truro, So a shout out there to Adam Tam and James Clark, who are picking up this principle of being able to actually monitor the surgeon in real time during a procedure in order to indicate sort of fluctuations in workload and stress, but also in the complexity of the task and the difficulty of the task as the surgery unfolds. The idea here is that this could be used later to feed back into XR training, or might just be a tool that we can use in vivo in the operating theatre to guide the surgeon and to give them extra clues and extra tips about what they might be thinking or feeling. And actually, there's quite reliable evidence here. We're pretty confident that these moments of pressure, these moments of high workload, and indeed these moments of increased complexity in the procedure, they do show up in the eyes for you know for different reasons. So the the complexity shows up because these tasks are visually guided. So if you're using your eyes to do something that becomes more complex, there's a signal there that the task is difficult. Um, but also all the centers of the brain that relate to pressure and stress, they're all really closely aligned with the visual cortex and other centers of the brain that are responsible for attention. So
And
it's
have you found any, sorry to interrupt you, Sam, have you found any difference between what the eyes are telling you and people's perception of their own levels of stress? Does that
interesting.
question make sense?
It does, yeah. There's a ton of research dedicated to solving that exact riddle. I mean, it's a bit circular sometimes because the mathematical models that you build to index emotions from eye movements, they are often validated by asking the person to tell you what it was they were thinking and feeling. But we also know that sometimes what people think or think they feel is at odds with the objective truth of what their body might be telling them. So we did a ton of research back in the sort of late noughties, early 2010s around this concept of challenge and threat, which is essentially sort of two very different reactions to the same kind of pressure. Sometimes you become challenged and you respond well to the pressure, and sometimes you become threatened and you can go wrong. And this just really speaks to that idea that pressure is like an objective experience that can vary. So yeah, it's difficult when you're using eye tracking to measure these things. You have to be kind of clear whether you're trying to measure the objective physiological truth, whatever that might be, the ground truth as it's referred to in data science, or whether you're trying to actually just index another way the subjective experience that the person's having. So am I under pressure and feeling stressed now? Not really. I certainly don't feel like I am, but I might be because I think if you were to measure my heart rate or any other physiological signals, I've probably got elevated versions of them now. You know, being here with you, having a chat. So, yeah, it's a complex data science problem that we're really trying to unpick. But again, that's for me, that's part of the fun. You get to tease apart those problems and do some good science. And if you crack the science, then you've got the basics of a really good tool and a really good product that you can believe in.
Yeah. I was speaking to some ophthalmic scrub nurses today, and you know, I'd be fascinated to see what it told us about their experience. You know, in terms of the number of legs that they have to go through during an operation.
Yeah,
It's really complex, and one, you know, one error, one false move, one incorrect bit of equipment can have catastrophic effects. And you know, those sort of human factors conversations and
sure.
the application of what you're doing, it has all sorts of applications, doesn't it? Not just in terms of redesigning the processes that people are following to make them less complex, but also things like scheduling. You know,
Yeah.
is it better to schedule this operation later because we know the person's going to be tired, or there's so much insight that can be gained. So let's talk about the tech itself, because as we know, everything is getting smaller and arguably cheaper. So at what point are we going to be able to? Okay, at what point am I going to be able to put on a pair of Ray-Bans and look at my own eyes and get insight into my own behaviors?
Not long at all. I mean,
Really?
in theory, technically, that's possible today. Certainly, Cineon have hardware and software combinations that are designed to do just that with either head-mounted eye trackers that you would wear like a kind of normal pair of specs, so-called smart glasses, which I guess Ray-Ban would fit into,
Mm.
or indeed more commonly at the moment in the eye trackers built inside XR VR headsets. Um, so yeah, we have tools out there in the wild at the moment that are deployed to do just this, and that's actually a nice segue just to take me back to the other health product we have, which is it's a virtual reality simulation of an MRI scanner, which is used to expose people who are phobic of scanning to all the noises and sounds and sights of the scanner. Which, exposure is a really well trodden path. People get that it works and helps a patient to turn up to the appointment if they're otherwise uh, planning on not.
Hmm.
um, Now, the VR simulation of an MRI scanner that Synion have built has eye tracking technology built into it. And what it does is it sort of passively and covertly monitors the person's stress and engagement levels. And as a result of that estimation of their workload or their stress or their anxiety levels, it delivers the right dose of exposure. Um, so the MRI scanner has loads of adaptations to it that you can implement. It gets bigger and smaller, it gets louder and quieter. The procedure that you're going through with the clinician, that's the virtual clinical team, speeds up or slows down or becomes more in depth or more sort of stressful. Um, so we're using that estimation to deliver like almost a personalized exposure therapy to the individual that's using it, which we think is quite smart.
My mind is racing. Our teeth. I think you're gonna. He's getting fed up of me asking questions here. It's gonna take over in a minute. I just wanted to ask you very quickly. So what you've just described there is really interesting because in going towards death and dying, one of the difficulties we have in nursing in particular is trying to figure out, is somebody symptomatic
Mm.
when they're unable to communicate, even physically they're not able to communicate. And
Mm.
do the eyes have to be open?
Yes,
Okay.
that's certainly they do, because that's the way the eye trackers work. And
Mm.
I would add a layer of caution to this, and that I think is important and speaks to the sort of the applications that we've got in play at the moment. Um, what we're trying to do in all of these applications we've described so far, in surgical training, in the development of exposure therapy tools, and in all of the other training environments I mentioned earlier, is we're trying to estimate emotions that are otherwise estimated by a human observer. So
Okay.
if you, in the context of training, you would have an instructor near you, or in the context of surgery, you would have a senior consultant on your shoulder, and they would be constantly holistically monitoring you and intervening at times when they felt like you were overwhelmed or stressed or anxious. In the context of exposure therapy, a skilled therapist would be watching the patient. They might be using video stimulus to watch the patient, see how they feel when they see and hear the scanner, and they might be grading that exposure, speeding things up, slowing things down. So it's that estimation by another human that we are trying to replace. And therefore, we're starting from a position of knowing that those estimations are already very flawed, very biased, and not at all precise.
Mm.
And so our tools only have to be better than those. And so I use the phrase estimation very carefully here, because this isn't a measurement tool. We don't really believe just yet that we can precisely measure these constructs on a sort of given scale reliably. What we can do is we can estimate those things well enough to put that estimation to work and allow that estimation to have a really, really quite impactful effect on what the person's doing. So if I can estimate your anxiety levels in your exposure session, even 50% well, even I'm half right, or I'm
Mm.
right half the time, whichever. That's really powerful. Um, so we do get quite a lot of opposition from some purists who know a bit about how to measure these constructs, and they're experts in what they do, and certainly in the research we do, we agree with them. But in the deployment of a tool, we can ease off a little bit, and we can say, what is the level of estimation of these things we really need for there to be an effect, an outcome change. Um, so, for example, we're often asked about whether these tools could be used in the diagnostic sense for things like generalized anxiety disorder or OCD. And actually, quite quickly, we're happy to say probably not at this stage, because for all the reasons I've just said, we know that they're not precise enough just yet. But what's exciting is that there's nothing stopping us. There's no hurdles in the way to these tools becoming more accurate with more data, and becoming more precise with better software engineering. And so it's not a conceptual problem to get there. It's just a time served and data required problem to get there. So I think we could be using those kinds of tools at some point in the future.
I think that's
Or, yeah.
okay, right? Because often when you're developing things, you start with a minimum viable product, right? So what's the minimum we can do to make a difference, and then you add to it, rather than
Yeah.
waiting longer, because you can still start gaining benefits immediately then, right?
Sure,
Uh,
yeah, exactly. And those benefits are quite powerful in the industries that we're already deployed in. And there would be no need for any more accuracy in those. The
yeah,
accuracy we have is sufficient because, as I say, it's replacing the flawed, biased human that's doing those things already.
sure. So one last question for you before we wrap up then. Just looking at the future roadmaps or what's coming and exciting technology or the way you see things going now. What with Synion, for example, what's the future hold?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of technological kind of, I guess, step changes on the way that I guess most people would cite when you ask them that question. It's difficult to see past smart glasses at the moment and the reintroduction of kind of holographic technology that would allow you to have normal specs on, but that provide you with digital assets in a kind of mixed reality sense. And certainly being ready for that next wave, the next wave of that technology is important. Um, and it's also hard to see past integration of large language models or generative AI of some kind within these ecosystems that we're already in. I think the eye tracking technology married with some kind of immersive technology is, we've already kind of covered that. But I think expanding into these new form factors, you would have seen Meta Orion and Aria 2 and these smart glass technology that are coming from the likes of Snapchat, etc. Yeah, mixing those in with real-time AI chatbots essentially, and I'd use that phrase carefully because it makes it sound a little amateurish, but real-time chatbots that will be both reading those emotions and those cognitions, but also then troubleshooting with you in real time. I mean, that's exciting from my perspective. And exciting for two reasons. I think the performance impact that could have for these tools being used in health training or in provision for patients is going to be powerful, but also exciting because it just throws up a ton of cool questions that we can get our teeth into back in the lab. And a ton of actually less cool questions around regulation and security and all those sorts of things as well. But we'll leave that to the politicians and the like.
Brilliant.
No, well, thanks very much, Sam. It's really insightful. And hopefully our listeners have gained quite a bit as well from it. And yeah, no, thank you for coming on, adding to our podcast.
No, thanks for the invite. It's been fun.